All right. So one of my Democratic friends had sent me this in Messenger. Apparently, this was a post from some conservative page. It says right here, Gavin Newsom and Michelle Obama 2024. Michelle Obama has pulled donors from Joe Biden because around the month of May, Biden will drop out, so Michelle and Gavin Newsom are nominated, even though no one would have voted for them in the primary. I think Gavin Newsom will replace Joe Biden and Michelle Obama will replace Kamala Harris. Why did they do this? Because they didn't want confrontational debates where they would have had to attack Biden on his destructive policies, because in the end, Gavin Newsom and Michelle Obama will continue the same destructive policies. All right. So there's a few things to say about this. And I've heard this talk going around for a while now that says that they think that somebody's going to come in to replace Biden and, they'll just be the nominee even though people won't vote for them. First of all, we've never had that. I don't think we've had that before. Now, you check the history, I don't. Let me just pretend for one split second that that's true. Let me just pretend for one split second that I believe that. Now, a lot of the Democrats are going to vote for Biden Harris in the primary, which, by the way, is what I plan on doing. So if we vote for them and they get nominated, how does that work? They just step down and say, okay, never mind, we don't want to do this anymore. And then the Democratic Party just says, okay, Michelle, Gavin, all right, you two, step up. Now you're here. And so now y'all are the nominees. Now, here's one thing that if something like that were to happen, don't get me wrong, I would love to vote for somebody like Michelle Obama. I would love to vote for somebody like Gavin Newsom. But I want to know, here's what I need to be sure about. And I'd have to check with every single Democrat and every single independent voter on this one. If they do that, how sure can I be that all of the Democrats who are already on board with Biden Harris, are they all going to switch over and then support whoever the next two people are, even without the proper process? Like, is it going to be like, okay, it was going to be Biden Harris, but okay, we're going to support Michelle and Newsom? Or are some people going to be ticked off and say, no, we wanted Biden Harris, and they're going to decide not to vote because they switched it up? That's my fear. That's my fear. And on the destructive policies part, I have a feeling that they're criticizing the wrong policies, number one. I guarantee you what they're not criticizing. They're not criticizing the giving the weapons to Israel or overfunding Ukraine or staying in the weapons deal with Saudi Arabia. I don't think they're criticizing that part. They're not. I think they're trying to, and I don't know how. I could be wrong here. This is speculation, but we've talked on this show before about the accomplishments of the Biden-Harris administration and a number of the pieces of legislation and executive orders and other policies that they've passed, or even the good ones that should have went through that they attempted to pass, but they were blocked by Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema of West Virginia and Arizona, respectively. That's why they need to be voted out. But that's a different story for a different video. Biden and Harris passed the American Rescue Plan Act. They passed the CHIPS Act, the COVID relief package. They capped insulin at $35 a month. They gave $15 an hour to federal workers and contractors. They moved marijuana from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. And by the way, the COVID relief package and American Rescue Plan Acts and the Inflation Reduction Act, respectively, have given tens of millions of dollars, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars to a lot of small-owned businesses. They put money into the Paycheck Protection Program, the Disaster Relief Fund, things like that. The Economic Injury Disaster Relief Program, they put money into that. The CHIPS Act brought back over 800,000 manufacturing jobs and plus onshored an additional 350 million jobs from overseas. So far I haven't seen anything about outsourcing, which is what we've done under almost every president before that. They gave $500 million to HBCUs, which as a result that helped a lot of black students pay off or at least reduce their student loans. They also canceled up to $20,000 in student debt per individual. Now, we wanted them to cancel all of the debt, but that right there is a good start, and that's much farther than what most of us were thinking that they were going to do. I thought they were going to do like 1 to 5,000. They did up to 20,000, so that was a good move. That kind of surpassed my expectation there. They pardoned some marijuana offenses, not all, but they should do all, but they did some. They cut the contracts that the Department of Justice had with private prisons. They put a pause on the U.S.-Saudi weapons deal. They put us back in the World Health Organization. They put us back in the Paris Climate Agreement. They were supposed to put us back in the Iran deal, but they haven't done that yet. Supposedly they shot it down, but hopefully they'll flip on that and give us that. Let's see, what was the other one I was thinking of? They re-enrolled millions of Americans, tens of millions of Americans back onto the Affordable Care Act. They gave a pay raise to over 200,000 construction workers. There was a rule that was put in place by the White House NLRB years ago, and I think this was under Reagan or Bush Sr., where anybody who was making $35,000 and under was eligible for overtime pay. The Biden-Harris administration actually changed that last year, and they moved the cap up to $55,000. Now, me personally, I don't think that there should be a cap on it. I just think that if you're an hourly worker and whatever hours you work, you just get paid those hours. So I think it's ridiculous that, if you make $54,000 a year, you get overtime pay, but if you make $56,000, you don't get it. I think that's ridiculous, but $55,000 and under is still better than $35,000 and under. They've made a lot of good moves on that. Let's see, what else? Anything on foreign policy? Okay, they massively reduced the drone war by over 80%. They got us out of Afghanistan. It was a little messier than what we wanted it to be, but I mean, we're out. And I wasn't entirely sure if they were going to do that in the beginning. So there's all these things that have been done. Oh, and they stood by the UAW workers while all the Republicans were sitting there saying, no, you don't deserve to strike, and you strike, you're fired. They're quoting the Reagan quote. And so they went by them. They said they were going to negotiate a pay raise for them. I don't know if they gave it to them yet, but at least they talked about it. But the next step is actually doing it. I'd have to look more into that one. So, and then there was also the child tax credit thing. They tried to put the K through 12 funding and two free years of community college into the original Build Back Better plan. Of course, that got watered down thanks to Manchin and Sinema. So you have all these things right here. And I guess my question is, out of all those things right there, what's disastrous? And by the way, the gas prices are a hell of a lot lower now compared to what they were 2 years ago. I mean, gas prices were $4, $5, in some areas probably even close to $6 a gallon. And now I'm going around to these different cities and different places, and I see gas on average between $2.60 and $2.80, $2.90. I mean, that is a massive drop. That is a massive improvement. I think one gas station I saw a Shell in Romulus or Taylor. It was as low as $2.52. I did not think I was going to see that. I said, you know what? If we get down to $2.90 or maybe $3, I said that'd be lovely. $2.52. That is beyond amazing. There are lots of improvements in a lot of different places. Now, you can still argue that there's other things that are terrible. You know, the border crisis, which I'll wholeheartedly admit, I think both parties failed on the border thing, on the immigration thing. I think most of the last few presidents failed on that. So, but with all those things being said right there, with all those right there, this person right here who says the same destructive policies, I don't know, other than you just think it's communism, it's socialism. Also, the Biden-Harris administration cut $1,400 stimulus checks. It was supposed to be $2,000, but I'm sure that $1,400 benefited many people. For some people, it may be insufficient. For others, it was well sufficient. Now, as far as Gavin Newsom, I'll tell you this. Here's something I'll give you off the top of my head right here. This is the part where somebody's going to say, give me 1 or 2 things or even 3 good things that Gavin Newsom did for the state of California. I can give you 4 or 5 that I can think of, like 4 or 5 really, really good ones. One, so he, on top of the federal money that we got with the stimulus checks, he gave $600 to his citizens. And then months later, he gave an additional check of $1,000. But if I'm not mistaken, I think that $1,000 didn't go to every single citizen. I think that mostly went to people who were in poverty and like some of the middle class and like some of the elderly. So maybe people who made X amount of dollars a year or under, they were eligible for it. So essentially, you're talking about $1,600 stimulus checks. Didn't know he was going to do that at first. There was that. He lowered the Medi-Cal age to 50. Medi-Cal is the Medicare in California program, just like how they had remember when Mitt Romney was the governor of Massachusetts, they had the healthcare plan out there called Mass Health. California's Medi-Cal. So that's 2. He gave $20 an hour to fast food and restaurant workers. He provided proper protection equipment for kids in schools. He did a program that provided 3 free meals a day to the elderly, especially during the height of COVID. Now, I don't know if that policy is still going on, but on those things alone. And I do believe that he signed something that essentially lowered the cost of insulin out there. Keep in mind, before he did those things, he already had a good approval rating. His approval rating on average was like 56 to 58%. And that was during like the recall election as well as his re-election from 2021 and 2022 respectively. And he was crushing all of his opponents by at least 20 percentage points. I think he was up against Republican Brian Dahl by 30 points. But then he did those policies and his approval rating went up to 64%. And then you got people like Larry Elder and some of these Republicans that have the nerve to sit there and say, this is why most Californians don't like Gavin Newsom. And this is why he will easily lose. Really? The guy who did those policies, who has a 64% approval rating and even an approval rating of at least 15 to 20% amongst Republican voters. Those numbers are amazing for a Democratic governor. I think Gretchen Whitmer has like a 9-10% approval rating amongst Republicans here, and she still won re-election. Gavin Newsom is at 15-20% with Republicans out there. Now, to be fair, granted, there's not as many Republican voters in the state of California. California is a 80 to 90% blue state, so I don't know if it's directly comparable. But nevertheless, that's what the polls had demonstrated, and that's what California polls had stated. I mean, personally, I would say if it wasn't for Biden, then yeah, I would be strongly pushing for Newsom in this election here. And I think that his debate with DeSantis shows that he's ready for 2028 for sure. I don't know that he's going to sneak into 2024. And if he does, I just feel like it's too late right now because I don't know. I just don't want him to just kind of mess this whole thing up and people don't want to get on board and stuff because they're used to like, hey, we were backing Biden. I don't know. I mean, if it happens, I will gladly vote for Gavin Newsom and Michelle Obama. And because obviously, with her husband and everything, she was with them and he bailed out the auto industry and he decreased the troop level in Iraq, decreased the troop level in the tensions with Afghanistan, normalized relations with Cuba, got us in the Paris Climate Agreement, got us into the Iran deal, things of that nature. Obviously did the Affordable Care Act thing on the national level, which benefited many. It might have screwed some. So let's be fair. Let's not pretend it's perfect. So, I mean, the Obamas have that legacy alone and they have those accomplishments, those achievements there. But I don't know, anybody who's a Democrat who's watching this, if you're a Biden supporter, if you're a Biden-Harris supporter, I mean, you tell me what you think. If Biden-Harris drop out and they get replaced with Newsom and Michelle, what do you personally think? Do you think that should happen? So I don't know. You give me your thoughts. You tell me.